Humanity is a flawed species. We mess up, fall short, and miss the mark. Despite our flaws, some try to improve upon themselves and find beauty in their ability to change. But if there's one thing that humanity can always find beauty in, it's things that go hard. Baja Blast, this video of a crab, mozzarella sticks, the PS2, NASCAR, catching disproportionately large fish, this picture of broccoli, and any car that's not a Subaru. All of these have something about them that goes undeniably hard. And if there's one anime that you can add to the conversation, it's Gurren Lagann. Gurren Lagann is an anime released by Studio Gainax in 2007 and was directed by Hiroyuki Imaishi. Imaishi was a huge fan of mecha anime and had even worked on Gainax's genre-defining title Neon Genesis Evangelion. Evangelion is known for its psychologically deep storytelling that redefined how many viewed anime in general, but mecha anime more specifically. It was a completely different approach to the genre. The giant robots and epic battles that were once celebrated by other mecha anime were treated as sources of trauma and hardship in Evangelion. But Gurren Lagann reaffirms what those older shows celebrated while still drawing influence from Evangelion's timid protagonist and progressively grim circumstances. But the two tonally clash, where every time that Evangelion chooses despair, Gurren Lagann chooses hope. The series takes place in a world where a large portion of humanity is forced into underground villages and the surface is ruled by beastmen and the gunmen they pilot, which are the show's primary mechs. As the characters go on their journey, we witness the world expand and see more about how these isolated villages have changed their inhabitants, which makes her an interesting world that has a place in telling the overarching story. It mirrors the progression of its plot and its characters, meaning that as the stakes get higher and the characters become stronger, the scale of the setting increases as well, which always makes each location feel fresh and in place. But the best thing about the world of Gurren Lagann is how nonsensical it is. People, animals, and giant robots wear sunglasses regardless of whether they're on the surface or underground simply because it looks cool. One of the earliest enemies in the show is whatever this thing is, and we're just supposed to take that seriously? But the thing that's the most far-fetched is Spiral Power, which allows humanity to overcome any challenge they face as long as they believe they can. Spiral Power is what fuels the gunmen, not giant batteries or unconventionally long cords, because Gurren Lagann already kicked logic and made the impossible possible within the first 5 minutes. Your disbelief was suspended the moment the show started. Spiral Power is the ultimate nonsensical trump card, but it isn't an automatic win button that makes every battle feel repetitive. Spiral Power relies on the character's belief to push forward, which is directly tied to their emotions. This requires the characters to have the will to fight on no matter the circumstances, which doesn't always happen. The power system of Gurren Lagann is a representation of the state its characters are in, and while being completely illogical, it fits thematically. Spiral Power represents the narrative's themes of belief and self-improvement, and by making it the main power system, the story is able to clearly and effectively communicate its messages. As for our characters, there's Simon, a timid yet capable young boy, Kamina, an energetic and inspiring leader, and Yoko, a skilled and practical sniper. The cast expands as the show goes on, but these main characters remain the heart of the show thematically regardless of whether or not the plot is focusing on them. Even as early as the first episode, they resemble themes and hint at growth that we can expect to see later on. For instance, Simon's frightened nature causes him to hesitate when he has to pilot Lagann. He has the skill, yet lacks confidence, and is made up of other character tropes that force him to become the hero he needs to be. He's only able to eventually take control of Lagann because of Kamina, who has a completely different personality from Simon. Where Simon lacks confidence, Kamina arguably has too much, but it's that constantly overconfident state that encourages Simon to take action despite his many fears. Kamina is the man that Simon wants to become, but Kamina wouldn't be able to have the confidence he does if it weren't for what he sees in Simon. He sees Simon's unmatched potential and persistence, and he's the only one who can draw it out of him. It's Simon's capabilities that fuel Kamina's confidence because he knows he has the skills necessary to lead them to victory. The duo's reliance on each other is visually showcased with the introduction of the gunman Gurren Lagann, which is a combination of Simon's gunman Lagann and Kamina's gunman Gurren, which he stole from a beastman. Do you think if he filed a stolen item report, the police could take him seriously? As much as I love this visual representation of Kamina and Simon's dynamic, I think my favorite thing about this combination is how dumb it is. There's no reason the combination of mechs should work other than the fact that it's cool, but that's the whole point. The show doesn't take itself too seriously and bore viewers with an explanation of the inner workings of combining gunmen, and instead does something cool and puts well thought out writing behind it, which is a positive that can be attributed to the entire series. The other member of the show's main trio is Yoko, who serves as the reasonable member of the group. What makes this trio work so well is that each member plays a significant role in the group's dynamic, and they all rely on each other. If even just one of them were removed, the group wouldn't be able to function properly. But these three are only the first of many characters that make up Team Gurren. As our cast goes further into this world, we meet new characters that join their cause of reclaiming the surface. There's Rasu, a boy from an underground village that operates under corrupt beliefs, a group of orphans known as the Black Siblings, and we even get introduced to antagonists like Vero. While it at first looks like these characters are restricted to the episodes they're introduced in, they eventually return and the cast of the show expands greatly. But what makes this work so well is that each character serves a role in telling the overarching story. Not a single addition to the cast feels superfluous, no matter how expansive it gets. Every character is added intentionally, which is something that you unfortunately can't say about a lot of stories. Like, I just met this guy, I genuinely have no idea what he's doing here.
What even are you?
But after the characters and world are established, the show proceeds with nonsensical battles between silly characters that most would consider to just be dumb fun. While there is some substance to this earlier part of the series, there's little to get invested in since it lacks seriousness. The show doesn't take any of the events that happen in the opening act all that seriously, and the tone is silly and never really makes viewers consider risks. The villains lack depth and are just silly looking creatures, like go ahead and try to tell me this guy is threatening. This is where Gurren Lagann is considered to be at its weakest. However, a couple of episodes later, the show increases in substance. Instead of keeping the action episodic, it becomes more focused through goals such as taking Daigunzen, an enemy vessel. More emotional and thematic depth is injected into the show as a result of this tighter focus, and characters start to put their values into action in what is their biggest battle yet. Okay, so I'm about to start spoiling it, so you may want to start heading out or whatever, just so you don't get spoiled on anything.
911, what's your emergency?
Hey guys, can you come pick me up?
At the end of episode 8, Kamina dies in the battle for Daigunzen. Killing off Kamina is one of the boldest things they could have possibly done at this point in the story. He's essentially the heart of the show and a thematic representation of everything that Gurren Lagann is about. He's funny, over the top, and an inspiring leader that encourages others to believe in their capabilities. He always managed to escape the riskless and lighthearted battles that the show was relying on. But as much of a complaint as the silly tone of the previous episodes were, that the reason Kamina's defeat hit so hard. Those episodes were only a deceptive prelude of what was to come, as Kamina's death comes out of nowhere and causes the show to completely change direction. The episodes are no longer silly adventures and instead change to become a story about processing grief, which is just as surprisingly well executed as it is surprisingly introduced. Not only does this sudden development change the audience's perception of the show, but it also changes our characters. The members of Team Gurren were united under the same cause and led by Kamina. He brought the energy that the team needed to put their values into action. But with Kamina gone, each of them feel the weight of his death and have difficulty figuring out what to do now that the glue that was holding them together is gone. However, none of them feel quite as lost as Simon. Up until now, all of Simon's courage came from Kamina. He was too scared to believe in himself and instead believed in the Kamina who believed in him. His identity was tied to what Kamina thought of him, and now that Kamina's gone, Simon doesn't really know what to do. He emotionally withdraws from the other members of Dai Gurren, fails to pilot Lagann, and is so fixated on the idea of trying to be like Kamina that he loses sight of himself. It's at this point the show introduces Nia, a sheltered and innocent abandoned daughter of the man who forced humanity underground. Since she never knew Kamina, she's the only one who is able to see Simon's strengths without comparing him to Kamina. Her ability to see Simon in this way is what gets him out of his oppressive state and allows him to finally believe in himself on his own. Because of this, Simon is able to pilot Lagann again and get Team Dai Gurren's first win in a while in one of the most satisfying scenes in the entire series. But what makes this scene so satisfying isn't the flashy animation, intense action, or even the use of sunglasses as weapons. Those are only the cherry on top, since this scene more than any other showcases the fruition of Simon's character arc. Simon finally realizes his capabilities and believes in himself, which is something the show has been building towards this entire time. Yoko is another character that we are given further insight into as a result of the circumstances surrounding Kamina's death. Despite how much others have changed, her calm and confident demeanor remains the same. She does so in order to preserve the well-being of Team Dai Gurren, but once she's away from the other members, the effects of Kamina's absence start showing. Contrary to how she appears for the sake of her teammates, she's in a state of grief that only audiences can see, which makes her character more believable. Yoko is further humanized when she lets her emotions get the best of her and lashes out at Simon in a way that shows her flaws. However, she later acts in ways that show she truly cares about Simon and his well-being. These events stress her importance to the group more than ever before, and creates a more vulnerable character that viewers grow to appreciate more. All of this is to say, Gurren Lagann knows how to use a character's death to move the story forward. While tragic, it's the catalyst for Gurren Lagann to tell the story it sets out to. It causes characters to mature and exhibit themes of belief and growing up. Using this story beat as the show's progression into greatness can be rough to watch. One of the most likable characters is killed off, all of the other characters viewers loved became a little too serious, and the lighthearted tone was overtaken by a much gloomier one. But if it weren't for that, Gurren Lagann wouldn't have been able to grow to the incredible story that it becomes afterwards. Much like the progressing maturity we see in Simon and other members of Team Dai Gurren, the growth of the series comes with hardship. Trying circumstances such as this one cause the story and characters to advance to something far greater than ever before, which is part of why Gurren Lagann's approach to character development is so acclaimed. The betterment of characters like Simon is rewarding, but making it believable by forcing him to go through turmoil that shows his flaws is what makes it earned. The episodes after this growth are among the show's best so far, and the first half of the story ends with the fall of Teplin, the enemy base, which is one of the most memorable sequences in the entire series up to that point. It's because of how good the show had become by now that makes what happens next so interesting.
Row, fight the power! Row, fight the power!
At this point in the series, the show does a 7-year time skip. During those 7 years, humanity successfully inhabits the surface, and most of our characters live in a technologically advanced city named after Kamina. Many of the members of Team Gurren grow up and play important roles in society, whether they're government officials or military commanders. At first, it seems a little odd for the show to change so much only shortly after it started to find its more serious footing, but I personally love this direction. As I discussed earlier, the setting of Gurren Lagann changes to match the scale of its story and characters, and this time skip is no exception. This shift feels totally natural, and I always find it interesting that the characters create an entire society after inhabiting the surface. I feel like that speaks to the believability of Gurren Lagann's world building, but unfortunately that's the only thing you can say that about in this show. I also just really like seeing characters live somewhat normal lives. Like if you ever wanted the idea of Kitan paying bills to be canonically possible, then this is for you. Unfortunately, that's not something you're going to see though, because one episode into the time skip, Nia is revealed to be an anti-spiral messenger. The anti-spiral is basically a representation of the idea that if humanity grows too much, their spiral power could result in a world-ending event known as Spiral Nemesis. The appearance of the anti-spiral was triggered once population reached 1 million, which is something that Lord Gnome warned about at the end of the battle for Teplin. The city is quickly overran by anti-spiral weapons, and humanity is told that the moon will come crashing down on Earth to stop their spiral power from causing Spiral Nemesis. Simon ends up taking drastic measures to try and protect humanity. However, Rasu, who has now become a government official, deems that his actions are reckless and eventually exiles Simon and later arrests him. Having the government turn on Simon seems like an awful decision that came out of nowhere, but as we see more of it, this feels like a direction the story was always meant to take. The story takes so many twists and turns that feel out of place and like they could ruin the series if they're executed poorly, but that never happens. Kamina's death, a 7-year time skip, Rasu's betrayal, Yoko leaving, but these were all story beats that were meant to happen in Gurren Lagann. Every plotline, no matter how seemingly out of place, is intentional and allows the story to further explore its central ideas. As I mentioned earlier, Yoko is practically just gone from this portion of the show with barely any mention as to why. She returns when she finds out Simon was arrested, and we learn that she left our main characters to become a teacher in a remote location. I love how we get a whole episode that focuses on what Yoko has been doing the past couple of years, since it allows the show to take a break from the high-stakes storylines that it gets filled with around this time of the series. It's nice to just have a more relaxing episode, but despite how more laid back it still represents Gurren Lagann's themes. Unlike other characters, she didn't find fulfillment from playing some huge role in society and instead chose to live a secluded and calmer life as a teacher. Whereas many of our other characters continue to take progressively grander roles as they grow up and try to improve themselves, Yoko trades that for something simple. This shows that our characters don't always have to grow through things like intense battles and governmental power, but can instead find fulfillment and growth in roles that even viewers can have. Yoko becoming a teacher also reinforces the theme of passing the torch to the younger generation. This is a motif that we saw more clearly with Simon and Kamina, as Kamina was the courageous leader of Team Gurren and now it's become Simon, but at this point in the series, we don't see much else with that idea until it's reintroduced with Yoko. The change we see with Rasu also serves a major purpose to the story. While what he does to Simon causes many viewers to hate him, Rasu only does so because he believes it is in the best interest of protecting the people. To Rasu, what happens to Simon is only another sacrifice that humanity needs to make in order to continue living. This action, along with some of his others, tell viewers that in survival-threatening situations, Rasu believes sacrifices must be made, which is an ideology that we saw from the leaders of the underground village that he was raised in. This contrasts with the actions and beliefs of Simon and some other characters, who instead remain hopeful and believe that they can continue to push forward and reach new heights instead of regressing through sacrifice. Eventually, Rasu realizes how much harm he ended up causing despite his desire to only help, and becomes overwhelmed with guilt. When Rasu disappears without warning, Simon stops Rasu from letting that guilt get the best of him, and instead encourages him to move forward. Simon punching Rasu to snap some sense back into him stands as a testament of how much Simon's character has developed, whereas early in the show Kamina did the same thing to him, but now Simon has grown to the same level while still remembering the messy process that allowed it to happen. Outside of that particular scene, Rasu's arc continues to reinforce themes as we head into the story's climax. Rasu's belief about survival coming with sacrifices proved wrong, which only serves to further the theme of pushing forward and reaching new heights, regardless of how grim the circumstances. But as cheesy as it sounds,
Cheese?
you can only do so if you have the belief to, because in Gurren Lagann, belief is power. Eventually, the reaffirmation of these values causes the members of Team Gurren to reunite and fight back against the anti-spiral in one of the best and most memorable final acts of any anime I've seen thus far. There are so many things I love about this part of the show, and I think it's because these last few episodes are the best representation of everything that Gurren Lagann is about. One of the earliest and most notable instances of this representation is the setting. As I mentioned before when discussing earlier locations, the scale of the setting progresses along with the characters and story, but what makes this final area so special is the fact that it's in space. A boundless space, one with infinite possibilities that mirrors the limitless willpower held by Team Gurren in these final episodes. Now why the brave little toaster went, I don't think I know that. As for the members of Team Gurren themselves in this last arc, many characters are given a spotlight that furthers the importance of the finale. Kitan, who had somewhat of a rivalry with Kamina in the earlier episodes of the show, sacrifices himself for the sake of Team Gurren, giving him a send-off that allows him to accept his own importance rather than getting caught up on comparing himself to Kamina. Viral, a beast man who was once an enemy of Team Gurren, even joins the cause. He gains spiral power and actually dreams of starting a family, showcasing that everyone has spiral power and the ability to pursue growth. Even Nia, who has practically become completely overtaken by the anti-spiral at this point, still manages to find the spiral power to break free and fight with Simon. This development also stresses that despite everything that's changed, Simon's and Nia's relationship is still important to each of them since it's the encouragement they get from one another that allows them to dig past their lowest point. Much like when Nia helped Simon out of his low point after Kamina's death, Simon does the same for her to set her free of the control of the anti-spiral, and as your local romance anime enjoyer, I kinda liked that. The team's willpower becomes strength through spiral power, which is a concept that becomes more apparent than ever before in these final battles against the anti-spiral. Spiral power serves as a conceptual manifestation of all of Gurren Lagann's themes, while the anti-spiral is a physical manifestation of opposing motifs. Where spiral power showcases growth, belief, and perseverance, the anti-spiral pushes for regression, doubt, and giving up. Seeing the ideologies that the show has always represented clashing with their antitheses makes the message of the story clearer and more captivating than ever, which continues to show that the battles in Gurren Lagann serve to further the story instead of just being cool action sequences. But that's not to say the coolness factor of these episodes is a throwaway. In these final episodes, the show goes harder than ever before, making what are personally speaking some of my favorite episodes of any anime I've seen. This part of the show goes so hard that it makes mozzarella sticks look like coleslaw and any car that's not a Subaru look like a Subaru, while the theming and character development is what ultimately makes the show. The incredible action and high stakes of these episodes put that theming and development on display in a way that makes them stand out. The hype that these episodes produce is only the spice in what is an already immaculate dish, and what's so cool about the hype is that it doesn't always come from action sequences. For instance, there's this one encounter where the anti-spiral traps Team Gurren in what's called the Multiversal Labyrinth, which is a place where they can escape to their ideal lives. Simon lives in a world where Kamina is alive and Yoko is able to marry Kitan, but there's this eerie feeling that this isn't right. For some reason, Kamina is somewhat of a coward and Simon lacks all of the growth that he gained. Eventually, a version of Kamina that's identical to his real-world counterpart shows up and causes Simon to question this alternate life. Simon and the other members of Gurren reject this world, and while there really isn't any action in that moment, it still manages to remain as one of the most exhilarating scenes in the entire series. That's because it contains everything that makes Gurren Lagann's action sequences so compelling without actually putting in any combat. This rejection showcases growth as Kamina points out that Simon has become taller than him, signifying that Simon has reached greater heights than Kamina. But more notably, the character's choice for reality over escapism stresses the theme of continuing to push forward no matter how hard it gets. Instead of comfort, Team Gurren chooses to advance a little further with each turn, and later powers up to become even stronger in their final fight against the anti-spiral, which continues with incredible writing furthered by incredible hype. For instance, when the anti-spiral breaks Super Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann's drill, it continues until Gurren Lagann is reduced to the small gunman we saw in the very first episode. But despite the constant downgrades, Gurren Lagann continues to fight. Gurren Lagann remains hopeful, pushes forward, and drills through hardship to reach new heights and persevere to what lies ahead. While the insane power-ups, beautiful animation, and galaxy-chunking battles of this final act make it incredibly entertaining, the complete realization of the themes represented by Spiral Power is what makes the final act the pinnacle of Gurren Lagann's storytelling. The same can be said for Simon's final speech, which arguably represents the story's message better than anything else in the entire show. It's hopeful, encouraging, and stresses the importance of the legacy of those who have fallen and those who will follow. The fact that this is being delivered by Simon, the same scared and timid boy we saw at the beginning of the series, is the cherry on top as it memorably culminates amazing character development and the motifs of growth that the story has stressed so much. After this final battle, our characters return to life on the surface, where Simon and Nia finally hold their wedding. However, since Nia is still an anti-spiral creation, this results in her unfortunately fading from existence. This is a very sad scene, especially since many viewers have grown attached to Nia. This attachment causes audience to feel similar emotions to that of Simon, who instead of trying to bring her back, accepts it since he knows he shouldn't try to eliminate pain without thinking of the consequences. His choice reflects the theme of moving forward despite hardship, creating an incredibly bittersweet ending that in all honesty can be difficult to watch. In the final scene of the show, Simon is seen watching the gunman pilots of a future generation while teaching a young child to use a drill. This of course continues the motif of passing the torch to future generations, But placing this at the end of Gurren Lagann causes viewers to look ahead all while looking back at everything the series has achieved. It honored the mecha anime that came before it, but does so all while taking the influence of Evangelion into consideration. Evangelion completely changed the landscape that Gurren Lagann was in, yet Gurren Lagann was able to use that changed landscape full of suffering characters and trying circumstances to tell a hopeful story about growth. Such an achievement encourages the genre to constantly push forward, as it stands for everything that has made mecha anime so beloved, all while pushing the genre to new heights, encouraging those that follow to do the same. Gurren Lagann is a show that starts underground and ends in space. It begins with a silly and lighthearted tone, but introduces heavier plot lines that cause the show to change direction. But these difficult plot points are what causes the story to grow, all while still holding on to its heart. It continues to stress the importance of hope and belief in oneself, because without them, there's no courage to dig your way through whatever lies ahead. Piercing through those challenges is what allows us to reach new heights, whether those heights are on the surface or in the far reaches of outer space. As cliche as this story's message sounds, it's delivered in a way that makes it seem more important than ever through nonsensically high stakes and comically cool fights. But it has a heart that beats even louder than those qualities. A heart that pumps an indomitable spirit through every facet of the show. And that's Gurren Lagann.
How'd you even get in here? Like, are you eating cheese? Is that the only reason you're... What are you even doing? No one man can eat that much cheese.
That's your limitation.